You wake up in the middle of the night, and your hand feels like a dead weight. It's that pins and needles sensation, like static on an old TV screen, buzzing through your fingertips. You shake it out, hang your arm over the side of the bed, and eventually, the blood flows back. You tell yourself you just slept on it funny. But then it happens while you're driving. It happens while you're holding your phone. You start dropping things, keys, coffee mugs, because your grip just gives out. Naturally, you hit the internet or you talk to a friend, and the verdict is almost immediate. It's Carpal Tunnel Syndrome. So, you buy the wrist brace. You wear it faithfully every night. You do the stretches. Maybe you even start looking into surgery because the numbness isn't going away. It's actually starting to burn. But here is the scary reality that gets missed far too often. What if you are treating the wrong problem? What if you go through the hassle of surgery, the weeks of recovery, only to wake up 2 months later with the exact same numbness in your fingertips? That happens more than you think. The wrist is often just the victim, not the criminal. The real problem could be hiding in your neck, your shoulder, or even your elbow. If you treat the wrist while the nerve is being crushed in your neck, you are allowing permanent nerve damage to set in while you focus on a decoy. Today, we are going to bypass the guesswork. We are going to look at why that tingling might not be carpal tunnel at all, and I'm going to walk you through a few specific self-tests you can do right now to pinpoint where the signal is actually getting blocked. It reminds me of a patient I worked with a few years ago. Let's call him Robert. Robert was a carpenter, a guy who worked with his hands his entire life. He came in convinced he needed carpal tunnel release surgery on both hands. He had the classic signs: numbness in the thumb and index finger, weakness when he tried to hold a hammer, and that terrible night pain that ruined his sleep. He had spent 6 months wearing braces that made zero difference. He was frustrated, he was scared he'd have to retire early, and he was tired of being told to just rest it. When we actually sat down and looked at his symptoms, something didn't add up. He mentioned that if he tilted his head back to look at the ceiling while painting, his hand would go completely dead instantly. That is not a carpal tunnel symptom. That is a neck symptom. We did a specific test, one I'm going to teach you in a minute, and it reproduced his symptoms immediately. It turned out Robert didn't have a problem with his wrists. He had a pinched nerve in his lower cervical spine, specifically at the C6 level. The nerve was getting choked at the source, up in the neck, but he felt the pain all the way down in his thumb. It's like stepping on a garden hose at the faucet and wondering why no water is coming out of the nozzle. If he had gotten that wrist surgery, it would have been a complete waste of time and money. To understand if you're Robert, you have to understand the wiring of your arm. You have 3 major nerves that travel from your neck down to your hand: the median, the ulnar, and the radial. They each have a very specific territory. This is the first clue in solving your mystery. Carpal tunnel syndrome only affects the median nerve. This nerve runs down the arm and passes through a tiny tunnel in your wrist. When that tunnel swells, the nerve gets squashed. The signature of carpal tunnel is numbness in the thumb, the index finger, and the middle finger. But, and this is a massive but, it rarely, if ever, affects the pinky finger. If your pinky finger is numb, stop treating carpal tunnel. You likely have an ulnar nerve issue, often originating in the elbow or the neck. If the back of your hand is numb, that's usually the radial nerve, but it gets tricky because nerves can be compressed in multiple places. We call this double crush syndrome. You might have a little bit of tightness in the wrist, but also major compression in the neck. The nerve becomes hypersensitive because it's being irritated at 2 different points along the line. Now, before we get to the physical tests, there is a massive physiological factor that makes your nerves more susceptible to this compression, something that has nothing to do with bones or ligaments. It's about the protective coating of the nerves themselves, the myelin sheath. When this coating degrades, your nerves start misfiring like a frayed wire. This is where most people fail to connect the dots between their diet and their numbness. If you are enjoying this breakdown and want to stay ahead of the curve on how your body actually works, especially the parts that keep you independent as you age, go ahead and click that subscribe button. I dive deep into these gaps of information that standard checkups usually miss, and I don't want you to miss the next piece of the puzzle. Okay, let's get into the testing. We need to rule out the neck, the thoracic outlet, and the pronator teres muscle before we settle on the wrist. First, let's check the neck. This is often called Spurling's maneuver, but we will modify it for a safe self-test. Sit up straight. Turn your head towards the side that hurts. Now, Gently tilt your head back and slightly to that side. If this movement immediately shoots an electric shock or numbness down your arm and into your fingers, that is a positive sign for cervical radiculopathy. That means the problem is likely a disc or a bone spur in your neck, pinching the nerve root. No amount of wrist bracing will fix that. You need to focus on cervical retraction exercises and posture correction. If that test is negative, let's move down the chain. The next common imposter is Thoracic Outlet Syndrome. This is where the bundle of nerves gets crushed between your collarbone and your first rib, or by tight neck muscles called the scalenes. To test this, bring your arms up like a field goal post, elbows at shoulder height, hands up. Now open and close your hands slowly for about 3 minutes. I know 3 minutes sounds like a long time, but if you start feeling that heavy, dead arm sensation or intense tingling within the first minute, that suggests the blockage is happening in the shoulder and neck area, not the wrist. This is incredibly common in people who have rounded shoulders or sit at a desk all day. Now let's look at the carpal tunnel mimic in the forearm, Pronator Teres syndrome. The median nerve, the same one involved in carpal tunnel, passes through a muscle in your forearm near the elbow called the Pronator teres. If this muscle is tight, it strangles the nerve before it even reaches the wrist. How do you tell the difference? It's in the palm. In true carpal tunnel syndrome, the sensation usually spares the palm of the hand because the branch of the nerve that supplies the palm branches off before the carpal tunnel. However, if your entire palm is numb along with your fingers, the compression is likely happening higher up in the forearm muscle. You can test this by resisting pronation. Shake hands with yourself or have someone resist you trying to turn your palm downward. If that triggers pain or tingling in the forearm and hand, you need to be massaging and stretching the forearm, not bracing the wrist. Let's say you've checked the neck, the shoulder, and the forearm, and they all seem fine. Now we can look at the wrist. The classic test here is Phalen's test. You press the backs of your hands together in front of your chest, letting your elbows drop. Hold this for 60 seconds. If this recreates your specific numbness in the thumb and first 2 fingers, then yes, carpal tunnel is much more likely. But even if it is carpal tunnel, surgery isn't the only option. We have to ask why the tunnel is inflamed. Is it repetitive strain? Sure, but inflammation is systemic. High blood sugar is a major, silent destroyer of nerves. Diabetic neuropathy often starts in the fingertips and toes. Even if you aren't diabetic, insulin resistance can cause the nerves to swell, making them too big for the tunnel. We also have to look at fluid retention. If you are holding water, that tunnel gets tighter. This is why B6 and magnesium are often recommended, as they can help with nerve function and fluid balance. But you have to be careful with B6. Taking too much of the synthetic form can actually cause neuropathy, making the problem worse. You want the active form, P5P. So here is your action plan. Don't just accept the diagnosis because it's the most common one. Test your neck. Check your posture. Feel your forearm muscles. Are they rock hard? If so, get a lacrosse ball and start working on that tissue. Floss the nerves. Nerve flossing is a technique where you glide the nerve back and forth to break up adhesions. For the median nerve, you extend your arm out to the side, palm up, and gently tilt your head away from the arm while extending the wrist. Then tilt the head toward the arm while relaxing the wrist. You aren't stretching it. You are flossing it. It takes time, but nerves heal slowly. The sensation of numbness is the last thing to leave. The first sign of improvement is usually a reduction in pain or a decrease in the frequency of the tingling. Now, we talked a little bit about how the health of the nerve depends on what you feed it and how systemic inflammation can squeeze these tunnels shut. But there is another side to this coin. Nerves stimulate muscles. If your nerves are firing correctly, but your muscles are rapidly deteriorating because of age-related decline, you're going to have weakness and instability that puts even more pressure on your joints and nerves. It's a vicious cycle. There is a specific nutrient that becomes absolutely critical for maintaining muscle mass and strength once you cross the age of 50. It's not protein and it's not calcium. Most people overlook it completely until they start feeling frail. If you want to keep your grip strength high and your muscles protecting your nerves, you need to watch this video right here. It's all about the #1 vitamin your muscles are screaming for after 50. Click right there, and let's keep building that strength.